How's it going, guys? It's been a while. It's me back once again with another video. Obviously, as you can see, well and truly getting into the new season coming up, and as of this release of the video, it's actually about a month until the season gets underway. So I thought, why not talk about it? Let's do a predictions video looking at the ladder, how it's going to shape up, and just overall just try and get into like the nitty gritty for some teams and lay out some expectations that I have. Now, just want to emphasize this is a prediction video. This is not a I know everything and you don't video, or a I've got the goods and you don't kind of video. This is just what I'm feeling like at this current stage of the year. You know, as of this recording, it is currently like mid-Feb. So, you know, in maybe like 2 or 3 months time, I might look back at this video and think how silly I was. And by the time it hits October this year, I might even think I'm even more sillier. But it's nice to just try and get the early thoughts out there and just kind of see where it is I think a lot of these teams are headed, and how do I think the season is going to shape up because of that. So just a quick explanation of how I'm going to be formatting this. So I'm going to be obviously doing where they're going to be placed, but I'm also going to be putting down their amount of wins that I'm kind of expecting for them to get in the season. So obviously, for example, if I have a certain team finishing like, you know, first, second, third, I'm not expecting them to get like 4 or 5 wins. They're going to be getting a lot more than that, you know. And a team that finishes like 7th or 8th, I'm probably not expecting them to get more than 15 wins. I'd probably be expecting like 10 or 12. Just as kind of like a guide, if you will, or a range, if you will. Key points to lead the team to this position. So things I've kind of reflected on in the previous season, what they've done during the off season, or just a general feel of what I've seen from the team as a whole that kind of leads me to believe positioning for the year. And then the ladder range. So I've got a little example here. So I might have a team that finishes 7th, or I would predict them to finish 7th, but their range is 5th to 10th. So what do I mean by range? So if they have a really good run with injuries, they win a lot of their 50-50s, so maybe a couple of games that are decided by 1 or 2 goals goes their way more often than not, they might finish a little higher. If they lose a lot more 50-50s and they win, they have a pretty average run with injuries, and just other little things here and there, there might be a team that drops down a bit, maybe like to that 10th area. But I would have that team predicted as to finish 7th, assuming that they have the pretty average season that they're expected to have, kind of thing. So the first team I want to talk about, we're going to be moving from bottom to the top. So in 18th spot, I've got the Hawthorn Hawks. I'm thinking about 2 to 3 wins for them going into the year. Obviously, they're a young rebuilding list. They've gutted a lot of their good talent, their experienced talent. Jacob Mira obviously moved along to a new side, and they have just a lot of young kids that they're probably going to be trying to get in as many games this year as they can. So I'm not saying that they're not going to be going out there to throw games or not be competitive or anything like that, but I'm not really expecting a lot from Hawthorn at the moment. Knowing my luck, they're probably going to be a team that beats us on Easter Monday. You know, and that'll be frustrating, but you know, outside of that, they might get a couple of wins here and there against other teams that are struggling. But yeah, I'm not really expecting much from them going into this year. I have a feeling they're probably going to be the wooden spooners. I've got their ladder range between 15th to 18th, so I think no matter how their season kind of goes, I'm pretty confident it should be a bottom 4 finish. And my prediction for them is in 18th spot. In the 17th spot, I've got the GWS Giants. Another team that I just feel like they have a really bad run with maintaining talent, don't they? You know, just, you know, 2 to 3 wins. They're another young side that just struggled to maintain it. Just many years of lost talent. You know, the infamous example is obviously Jeremy Cameron opting to come to ours truly. And just other bits of talent here and there, like Taranto. I know he moved along as well from the Giants. And it just seems like they have to rebuild every year. and they haven't really been able to hit the ground running since they had a pretty decent start. I think it was in 2013 or 14 when they were doing all right, and then obviously, as we know, in the I believe it was 2018 grand final, where they actually made it to the grand final and got thumped by a really strong and formidable Richmond side that year. So I've got them finishing between 15th to 18th. Another team that I'm pretty sure will probably fit in that bottom 4. I've got them placed, however, in 17th. I think they might narrowly miss out on the wooden spoon due to percentage. So in 16th spot, I've got the West Coast Eagles, 3 to 5 wins. So I've got them edging out the bottom 2 teams. The key points that I've got is really they can only improve. They can only get better after that horrid 2022 season. They're still lacking a proper identity or game plan, in my opinion, going into this year. And I think that's going to be their big struggle point. They don't really have something that they can identify by and use that to win their games. So, you know, I'm thinking they might snatch, you know, a few wins at home and they might get one on the road. But outside of that, I don't really see this team improving exponentially between the team that they were, you know, 3-4 months ago to the team that they will probably become in the next month to the team that I think they're going to be by the end of September. So, you know, I've got them as another team that's going to be having a pretty rough year. West Coast fans, get ready for another tough one. I've got them in between 14th to 17th. They are the team that probably could sneak out of the bottom 4 if they just get all their pieces right and they just finally find that game plan, that identity that works. But honestly, I don't see it. I don't see it, and I think they're going to be another team that fills out that bottom 4 spot. So, sorry, Eagle fans. Maybe 2024 might be a better year for you. And to round off our bottom 4, I've got the St. Kilda Saints. Now, this is probably one of the first controversial calls I have going into this video. This one's a big one. I know this is a big call, and I know a lot of people are thinking, you know, like, oh, what do you mean? You know, they were a top 4 side going into round 9 after they beat Geelong and stuff like that. You know, oh, you know, they should be a really good team. Yeah, but they finished really poorly. Really poorly. And they kind of showed a lot of holes in their game plan. And I've even got it noted here, like their list is pretty much the same going into the next year. They've added some young, decent talent through the draft. I think they picked up a couple of random bench sitters from other clubs. Correct me if I'm wrong. I do apologize for ignorance, but they weren't really any players that I thought were notable pickups. They got good young talent, don't get me wrong, but it's going to need time to solidify. They're going to need probably a couple more years until they can actually get that mold to fit together. Ross might be the key to help him out, but he's going to need a game plan shift if it's going to work out, because his game plan is probably a bit too slow, a bit too methodical. He basically tries to be like a copy-paste version of Chris Scott from that kind of 2012 to like 19 era. It's probably not going to work if that's the approach he's going to have, especially with a much younger, inexperienced side. So he's going to need to change that up if he's going to have any direct impact. I do have him between 12th and 16th as like their ladder range, meaning if they can get stuff clicking together, they could definitely avoid the bottom 4 easily. But I just don't see many things that are going their way to avoid that fate. And it is a controversial call, you know, having them drop this far down the ladder. But honestly, until I get proven wrong, this is where I'm going to have to sit them. So we'll see how it goes though, you know. Happy to be proven wrong, but as of this moment, I don't think I will. The next team I want to talk about, so a team that I think will be on a bit of a rise is North Melbourne. You know, 5 to 8 wins. I've got them going into the new year. They obviously got their new head man in Clarkson, who we know has been a brilliant coach for the Hawthorn Hawks, bringing them to premiership success and constant final success in general. Always being a team that, when you lined up against a Hawthorn team, you always knew you were going to be in a tough match that day. Very well respected coach, brilliant mind, or one of the brilliant minds of the football world. However, North Melbourne losing their hot gun in Francis is a big loss. He is looking to be like one of the hot talents in the AFL at the moment. So for him to make his way to Port Adelaide is a bit of a loss for North Melbourne, but they still got a pretty decent young core there that I think are keen to improve and to compete. And I think Clarkson can be the guy that helps them get there. It's probably not going to happen straight away, but honestly, I could see this being a year where North Melbourne turn a lot of heads. That's why I've got their ladder range being 12th to 15th. They could be a team that at one point, say round 9 or 10, if North Melbourne is somehow 3-4 or 4-4, they get a couple of upset wins, they could be a team that we talk about and say, oh, hang on a second, this team could maybe make finals. I don't think they will. I think they're just going to run out of steam, especially against the bigger teams in the comp. But they could be a team that could turn a couple of heads going into this new season. So, don't be surprised if they're a lot more competitive this year, but at the same time, don't be surprised if they do finish around that kind of 12th to 15th range that I've kind of got them highlighted here. In 13th spot, I've got the Essendon Bombers with about 7 to 10 wins. So a bit of a jump up from that bottom 5 teams, I want to say. Key points to address, Brad Scott comes in to help establish a new brand of success in their footy. Obviously, Walla is returning as well, which is a big plus side for Bombers fans. And look, honestly, despite their kind of lackluster year that they had last year when they had very high expectations, I think now that they've kind of been, I guess, humbled a little bit, they kind of had to face the light and realize that maybe they weren't as good as they thought they were coming out of that 2021 season. They're probably going to be a bit more hungrier and a bit more willing to have something to prove. Brad Scott has been a coach that has helped North Melbourne see decent success. We particularly think about the 2014 AFL season where, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe North Melbourne made the prelim that year in 2014, because I'm pretty sure I remember it. That was the year when Geelong went out in straight sets, and in the semi-final, I believe that was when we lost to North Melbourne. But like I said, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I know they've had a couple of years, North Melbourne, when Brad Scott was at the helm, that they were a very successful side. So Brad Scott knows what it takes to coach a winning team. And hopefully with a pretty decent core here at the Bombers, he can make it work. But, I don't think they're probably going to be playing finals this year. But I do think they are going to be a team that's going to be a lot more competitive. So I got them between 10th to 14th. Like I said, I don't think they're going to be making finals, but honestly, they could be a threat for it. In 12th spot, I've got the Adelaide Crows with about 7 to 10 wins. The key points that I want to focus on is that they've got a really impressive young core that looks to improve even further. And to be honest, on their day, this team is tough to beat in Adelaide. That crowd is as hostile as anything else, so they're tough to beat over there, and their young core that they have can only get better. So, I'm thinking they're going to be a team that, again, will probably not make finals, but will be a team that kind of causes a bit of worry into some teams. Might get a couple of upset wins throughout the year, and could be a team that maybe not 23, but 24, I think they could be back to finals contention. I think they could be a legitimate threat once they just get this one more year of football in them where they can start to become a real tough established team. So I've got them between 11 to 16th as their range. I think at their worst, they are bottom 4 team, but I think at their best, they are a team that can be a little bit of a threat to some teams in that kind of middle of the table. Now, I don't know if you'd call this like that much of a shock call, but they were a team that not only made finals last year, but were a team that were one of the talking points to have won the flag at points in the 2022 season. But in 11th, I've got the Western Bulldogs with about 10 to 12 wins. They're a very inconsistent side. You know, when they're at their best, they are top 4 quality. Like, they're fantastic. But when they are bad, oh boy, they are bad. They are bottom 6 worthy. You know, they just don't really have that kind of, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what the word is, but they don't have that pedigree in them where they go into a game and you know that if they put in their best effort, they're going to win the game. You know, you look at a team from last year, right? So 22, if we think about the 2022 versions of teams, you look at like a Geelong, you look at like a Sydney, you look at even a Collingwood. What else? You know, you like Melbourne were kind of questionable, but they were probably about there, and Brisbane as well. Those are the type of teams where you knew if they played their best brand of football, they could beat anyone. It didn't matter who was standing in front of them, they could beat them, right? Western Bulldogs, don't know yet. They're a bit inconsistent. And I think that inconsistency is going to cost them this year going to the 23 season. I think they're going to be slipping quite a bit. I do have them in the range to potentially make finals in 8th to 13th. They're definitely one of those teams where if they finish like in the top 8, like 7th to 8th, I won't be terribly surprised. But at the same time, like, I don't really think they're going to be a team that slips in. I think they're going to be one of those teams that slip out. So time will tell, obviously. But as of this current moment, I do have the Bulldogs at 11th, and I don't think I'm going to be too much off the mark going to the end of the season. Now, this is a very big call, and I know there's going to be a lot of Fremantle Dockers fans that are going to be livid with this prediction. But hear me out. In 10th spot, I've got the Fremantle Dockers with 11 to 14 wins. They lost some good talent this year. They brought in some good talent. But I think the thing that's going to hurt them is the teams that are around their mark are only getting better. So, you know, you think about the other teams that, you know, last year were about that kind of 5th to 10th range. A lot of those teams improved quite a bit in terms of their list quality. And I don't think Fremantle made a big enough jump to do that. And I'm going to be honest, outside of Perth, they don't really look like a team that could be that big of a threat. I know I say that knowing that this Dockers side did beat Geelong in Geelong. I wasn't at that game, by the way, so, you know, I remember looking back at the score and then looking at the highlights thinking, you know, what did we do wrong? But look, you know, that's from last year. This is this year. I just don't know if they have a list that's going to be upgraded enough to kind of keep up with some of the new teams going into the new year. I do have them ranged between 6th to 11th, so I do think that if they are a team that makes the 8, they're going to be in the bottom half of the bottom part of the 8. They're definitely one of those teams that's kind of in or out at the moment. They're either going to barely make it or barely miss out. But I do have them in 10th at the moment. Obviously, like I said, you know, this is one of those predictions where I am making a big call and I could be completely wrong and look like an idiot. But until I get proven otherwise, this is where I kind of have them. So only one way to prove me wrong. That's all I'm saying. Only one way to prove me wrong. And it's probably the worst spot to finish in the year, or one of the worsts. You know, you've got the wooden spoon, which no one likes to finish, but then you've also got this spot, the cursed 9th spot, where you were good enough to win so many games in the year where it was kind of worth to go watch your team play. but you just weren't good enough to just get one or two more stupid wins to get yourself into the 8. You know, that one game that you lost by 4 points because the umpire didn't call push in the back, costed you a final spot kind of thing, right? 9th spot, I've got the Gold Coast Suns. There has to be a team that unfortunately finishes in this spot, and I've got Gold Coast as that unfortunate team. But despite that, this is actually a rise for them. 11 to 14 wins. I think they had a very, very solid year in 2022. They caused a couple of upsets, and honestly, they could be the dark horse of the comp. That one team that's on the outside looking in that could potentially be a finals threat. You know, they could sneak in. They've got some great young talent there. They're doing a good job now in trying to maintain their list. They've got like a solid identity there now, and I think they've got a decent game plan. I think the biggest killer for the Gold Coast Suns at the moment, which might be the same thing that they struggle in going into the 23 season, is kind of their late game. You know, I'm talking like 10 minutes, 12 minutes into the fourth quarter, the game is in the balance. Sometimes they just kind of let it slip away, and then the match ends up being a 20 or 30 point loss to them when they were right in it, you know, 10, 12 minutes ago, and they just kind of just let these little stupid mistakes here or there cost them the game. So, honestly, I think they are a team that could potentially make it in, but I'm putting them in 9th for now because I do feel like they are going to be that team that just have that one or two unlucky games that they probably should have won or needed to win to make the finals, and they're going to be the team that barely misses out. I do have them ranged between 7th to 12th, so they could be a team that makes it in the bottom part of the 8, or they could be a team that doesn't miss it by a whole lot, but misses it probably somewhat comfortably and kind of finishes around the same ballpark area that they did last year with little to no improvement. And with that, we now move on to the top 8 teams. So congratulations to all the teams that I believe will make the top 8 going to 23, and we'll see some finals action. The first team I want to talk about, who I've got in 8th spot, is the Richmond Tigers. Hold up a second. Richmond were a pretty solid team in 2022. They were kind of unfortunate, if anything, to finish as low as they did. Let me explain. 12 to 15 wins. They did add in some good talent in Hopper and Taranto, but their predictable attack style game plan might not be as effective nowadays. So, unless they've got something cooking in the off season where they go with like a more either refined game plan that focuses on their attacking prowess, or they change the game plan completely, I don't know if it's going to be good enough to get them any higher in the ladder. I think a lot of teams just kind of know how to play against it now. It was a big issue in like 17, 18, 19, and even 2020, with 2020 being a bit of an asterisk year with the shorter quarters and the shorter season and everything else that happened in between, etc., etc. But now going into 23, I feel like just so many teams have kind of versed that style so much now that they kind of just know not necessarily what to expect, but what to do against it. At least the better teams do. So, you know, I think they're still going to be good enough where they can beat up on the teams that are below them, but I don't think they're going to really be good enough to stack it up against the better teams in the comp. Now, I do have them ranged pretty highly in 5th to 9th. I think they're either that team that'll either be good enough to be the best team outside of the top 4, or to be the infamous 9th man. Jokes aside, you know, I do have them as a team that I think should be solidifying finals, but could be that team that maybe slips out with like a bad injury or two and with a couple of unlucky games. But as of right now, I do have them a team that's finishing in the 8th spot going to the 23 season. In 7th spot, I've got the Carlton Blues. I think they just have to make finals this year. They really, really have to. 12 to 15 wins. They were in the top conversation for pretty much all of that 2022 season to the last few minutes of their final match of the year. With that being said, you know, it was actually a really good, solid year overall. I think a lot of Carlton fans have to realize or remember that they were a team that were struggling for quite a few years, and now they actually have a list that can contend with some of the best. They were very, very unlucky to miss out on the 8. They did lose, I think it was like 3 of their last 4, something like that, or even 4 of their last 4. I can't remember of the year, so that is a bit concerning. But I think now they're going to be a little bit more sharper, a little bit more prepared. I think their game plan's going to stick a little better. I think they're going to have better late game success. And I do think they do have the best chance that they have now to finally make finals and start being a part of the conversation. I do have a range between 6th and 9th, so again, if they do have a really, really poor year, but if they do have a couple of things that don't go their way, they could barely slip out again, which would be catastrophic for Blues fans. But if they get all the pieces working together, they could finish in, that kind of top, not top part, but like the higher end of the bottom part of the top 8, where they could see a home final. But for now, I do have them kind of at 7th. I don't really see them getting any more than 15 wins for the year. Like, I think that's probably going to be their max. But Carlton fans, I think this year you do deserve a final spot. I think you've got a really good list, but probably one of those years where they make the finals, they get first rounded, they learn from it, and then maybe in 24 they might be a bit more of a threat. But this is kind of where I've got them going into this year. In the 6th spot, now this one probably is a bit controversial because a lot of people don't really have Port Adelaide as a team that they rate going into the 23 season, but I've got them in 6th. 12 to 15 wins. They did start the 22 season 0-5, which is really, really bad for a team that was probably expecting to have made finals based off their 21 season performance. But since that moment, they actually went 10-7, which means at that kind of pace, they would have been a top 8 side. They probably, if they had went 10-7 for the first 17 games of the season, and then the 5 games that they lost, if they had won 2 or 3 of them, they probably would have been a team that finishes 6th or 7th last year. So they would have been a team that would have played finals, right? They obviously got a massive pickup in JHF, Francis, obviously, as we mentioned earlier in the video, did make his way from the North Melbourne Football Club to the Port Adelaide Football Club. Great young talent, and he can only get better in the right hands. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how Port Adelaide attack it this year. I do think they are a team that is a lot better than a lot of people may have them suspected to be. I've got them ranging between 5th to 10th. I don't think they're a top 4 side, just based off certain factors that I've seen in the offseason and from last year, but I think they are a side that should be good enough to make finals. They could slip out, of course. I do have them as low as 10th. Anything lower than that, would be catastrophe for the club. But yeah, I do have him as a side that should be making finals in the 6th spot. In 5th spot, again, another controversial one, if you will. I've got the Sydney Swans, 14 to 16 wins. They were the runners-up of the 2022 season. Buddy is going around another year. They have a great core. They have good culture. They should still be competitive going into the year. Honestly, though, with the top 4 teams that I currently have, which you probably should have guessed who those top 4 teams are by now, it's just a matter of order. It's going to be hard to crack that top 4. Especially considering that these 4 teams have either improved their side by some substantial margin, or they have a really, really good young core that did pretty well last year and can only get better this year, having gained that extra 20 plus games experience. So it is going to be tough for them to get that top 4. I do have them ranging between 3rd and 6th. So I do think if they do make the top 4, it'll be the bottom half of it. They could slip as far as 6th, but I think they should be a lock for finals. I don't think the Swans could dip out of the top 8. some absolute crazy stuff would have to happen at that club. Like, we're talking multiple injuries, we're talking a massive like downfall in staff management, behind the scenes stuff, you know, whatnot. Like, there has to be a lot that would have to go wrong for them to not make finals. So I do have them as a team that should be making a top 8 finish, and I have them as the team that is on the outside looking in of that top 4, due to those main points of the improved and more experienced sides. So to start our top 4, we do have a team that has been the talk a lot in the AFL due to their off-season moves and whatnot. In 4th place, the Melbourne Demons at about 15 to 18 wins. Now, I do want to emphasize here, all these teams I have in the top 4, all of them could finish first on the ladder. All of them could. If they just have like a couple of things go their way, injuries are something that is not really a concern to them, and they win more of those 50-50s than they lose kind of thing, any of these top 4 sides could finish first. But in the 4th spot, I do have the Melbourne Demons as the team least likely to finish first. Key point. So as I mentioned, they only got stronger in the off-season, acquiring Grundy, Hunter, and Shaki. However, they did get exposed quite a bit last season, lacking that kind of true scoreboard presence or pressure, if you will. But with their new recruits, they're looking to fix those issues, you know, in your Josh Shaki. Grundy, also another option that can go forward, you know. They're just trying to acquire this talent that can help them in that aspect. But otherwise, they are one of the teams that have a really good defense, have a pretty solid midfield. If they can fix that forward line issue, they will be a team that will not only be a team that will be highly successful going to the year, but will be a team that all the teams start circling on their calendar as we need to beat this side, or else we're not a team that's good enough to win it all going into the 23 season. So they're definitely a team to look out for, that's for sure, with their new talent going forward, and to see if they can recreate that success that they had in the 21 season. Now, this one I know is going to be a big shock considering the YouTube channel is built around it. But in 3rd place, I do have our Geelong Cats. 16 to 18 wins. I think losing Selwood as a player for that team with his leadership will actually hurt the side more than you think. But in theory, we only really improved our depth. We got Bose, we got Brun, and Ollie, obviously coming from the Magpies and whatnot. The Cameron Hawkins duo is absolute nightmare stuff for defenders. We obviously know what those two are capable of. You know, any one of them could have their day and just tear up a club to pieces for fun. But every team will be working hard to counter them. And I feel like that's where we might struggle a little bit. I think a lot more teams are going to be much more aware of the threat Geelong possesses and much more aware of the game plan we have going into the year, and kind of being more in tune to identify the threats we have in the forward line. And they're going to be working their darn best to try and shut that off. So we might struggle in those key areas, especially against the teams that are really strong defensively. But at the same time, like, I've got them ranging between 1st or 4th. I think we should be realistically a lock for top 4. And look, again, if everything goes our way, you know, we get a pretty good run with injuries, you know, Cameron stays healthy, kicks 50 or 60, whatever it is for the year. Hawkins, roughly the same margin. You know, we're talking about, you know, 110, 120 goals between two guys. That's ridiculous. You know, we could be a very, very terrifying side. And obviously, it is the year of our premiership defense, having come off the 2022 flag, as you can see here in the bottom right side of your screen. You know, it is the year of our premiership defense, and we're obviously going to be trying everything we can to go back to back. I do hope we do go back to back, obviously, you know, putting my bias cap on. But I do feel like, you know, a lot more teams are going to be focused on how to beat us, and it might make it a bit more difficult of a season. But I think we should still be good enough to be there. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we finished first once again, because we are still a very strong side. We still got a very deep core. And like I said, we only improved during the off season, which is ridiculous to think about it. And we got Jai Clark in the draft as well. You know, a top 10 pick player coming off a premiership year. How crazy is that? In second place, I do have the Collingwood Magpies. As much as that kind of leaves a nasty taste in my mouth, I do think they are a team that has a lot of upside going to this year. 16 to 18 wins. A lot of people argue, or some people argue, that they were lucky to win those tight ones, but you still need a way to win those. It's not easy. Like, you know, you look at a lot of teams that have been in close games and still lose them. You still need to find a way to win. And it kind of just shows a lot of their character and their guts that their young core has or had to win those tight games. They did massively improve from the 21 to 22 season with their young core. And honestly, after they got so close in the 22 season to making it into the big one, narrowly losing to the Sydney Swans, they're going to be hungry. They're going to be desperate to try and make the final match of the year this year. Ranging from first to fourth, I think Collingwood should be a lock for top four. I do have them as the second best team according to the ladder, at least. And yeah, I just think they're a very scary side. They got a very good young core, and like I said, they can only get better. Even going to 2024, they can only get better. So we'll see where that leads them. And you probably should have guessed it by now, but the best team I've got for the 23 home and away season is the Brisbane Lions. 16 to 18 wins. They did get smashed to the team that was considered the best team of the year in Geelong. In that prelim, it will sting a lot, but they will learn a lot from that, and they can only get better. They've got a great young core. They're going to be tough to beat it at the Gabba. And they're actually becoming a pretty decent MCG side despite that prelim loss. They kind of got all the core things that they need to win a premiership. You know, they've got a great ruckman, they've got a good forward line, they've got a great back line. Their midfield is very strong. They kind of just have what they need, and they only strengthened their side as well. They got in some great recruits going to this year. And with that, I can only see them being a better team than they were last year. So, you know, again, I think they should be a top four lock, first to fourth. You know, if they do finish like third or fourth on the ladder, I wouldn't be surprised. But I do think that, you know, if they have everything kind of laid perfectly for them and they have a good run of injuries and stuff like that, I do think they can finish on top of the ladder. So, you know, with that being said, that's it. That's my predictions. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and turn the notification bell so you don't miss my future videos. I will be doing vlog games of every home and away game in Victoria that Geelong play. I might do an interstate game, but nothing really confirmed yet. That's obviously going to be dependent on other things that are happening, you know, in my world that is outside the YouTube realm. But yeah, I will be trying to record or do vlogs of every single home and away game for Geelong in Victoria, which should be, you know, most of the games. And yeah, hopefully you guys join me for the journey as we go for our premiership defense. Like I said, thank you for watching. Have a good day or night, whatever time it is that you're watching this. And I'll see you in the next one, which should hopefully be soon. Cheers.